Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything, from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal.
History Files. Subject, former Governor Codus of Tarsus IV, also known as Codus the Executioner. After that, background on actor Anton Caridian.
Working. Codus the Executioner. Summary. Governor of Tarsus IV, 20 Earth years ago. Case closed. Detailed information follows. On stardate 2794.7.
Stop.
Codus.
All right, everyone. That was a clip from Star Trek. Today, we are going to talk about a new company that is kind of venturing into that space that just launched and making waves across the tech industry called Humane. Humane was started by former Apple designers and just recently launched their AI Pin, a wearable alternative to having a smartphone. Good morning, Dee. How are you doing? Welcome to season 9 of the podcast.
Hello. This was I saw this come out and I just had so many thoughts and I knew instantly like this was going to be a podcast because we had to react to this.
I don't think there's a better product for two UX guys to talk about. I mean, I had so many thoughts, so many questions, few things I was actually really thought were very cool, interested in. Just so much there. Before we jumped into that, though, I really wanted to kind of catch up with you a little bit. So we took a couple months off. We'd been kind of grinding season after season and taking little breaks and stuff. So for this one, for everyone listening, we decided to take a couple months off and just really kind of get our heads straight, work on the business, and then come back here with season 9. Did you do anything over the last couple of months since the break?
Oh man, everything's such a blur. I have no memory of anything that really happened in the last few months. I just remember like working on just working on various different things, working on some marketing copy for the stuff that we are working on behind the scenes that we're hoping to bring to people in the near future that we're really excited about. And beyond that is just, one thing. I have re-engaged with playing golf, which you and I used to do in grad school together back in the day, and we were terrible at it. I am happy to report that after more than 20 years of playing golf and getting back into it for a few weeks and like really working hard on my swing, I am still absolutely terrible.
Well, golf is one of those things that, it feels like martial arts or any of the others. It's just like, if you are not consistently doing it, you just get worse and worse over time. Like it's not like a bike where you just hop on a bike and start riding. It's so difficult, but so fun at the same time. It's like your brain wants to constantly try, even if you're failing. It's a great, great sport. So are you back on the course, or have you just been kind of training at the, driving range, or what?
No, yeah, I've been going to the driving range, but I actually set up like a little practice area in my backyard, which is, I have to say, when I first started playing in like the 90s, late 90s and stuff, after my first trip to Hawaii. My first time playing golf was in Hawaii and it was terrible. I was terrible. Playing golf in Hawaii was fantastic. But like the fact that YouTube is available and you can actually see videos of like, oh, this is what we mean when we're describing things and like reading the books in the old days and stuff. But yeah, you can get a net and like a mat on like Amazon and stuff and set up in your backyard and just hit some balls. And now they have like these really good launch monitors you can set up. So you just hit a ball into a net and then you have this little piece of equipment that tells you like, oh, here's what your ball did or would have done if you were out on the course. So
that's awesome.
I've mostly been doing that. And then every now and then I'll go to the course in order to like or not to the course. I'll go to the range and see like, oh, okay, well, let's see how I'm actually doing.
So. Yeah, I remember when we worked at NASA, we played at the course that was there for a while, which was kind of fun.
Moffett.
The Moffett course. Yeah, it was kind of cool that you could just kind of get out of work, drive over to the Moffett course, play around, with some friends or whatever before you go home. But there's also one near your house that I shouldn't say near your house. It's actually a little bit of a distance from you. But is that the Coyote Creek? Is that the one that's like way out in like Morgan Hill or something like that? It's super beautiful and warm. It has like a lot of elevation gain. Like you're hitting like uphill almost.
I think you might be talking about Cinnabar Hills.
Cinnabar Hills, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. That is, crazily enough, that is still in San Jose city limits.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
As far out as it is, it's still technically in San Jose. So if anybody's like, in the Bay Area or in the South Bay and you want to go to a really cool golf course, Cinnabar Hills is it. You can actually go there, and on most days you can hit. If you go to like the range, you're hitting off of actual grass. The course looks great. But take note of how far you feel like you are in like a rural area and outside of San Jose. It's a good like 10-15 minute drive outside of like the nearest house. And it's still within San Jose city limits, which is a little nuts.
I just remember playing there and thinking to myself, I think I'm hitting uphill. Like it wasn't like I was hitting straight or like downhill. I mean, because it was hilly, but like
Mm-hmm.
super beautiful. It was like it was a very challenging course. And I also remember there being a sign there that says "Watch out for rattlesnakes,"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because they're
We
all
went for a hike early this week and almost stepped on a little baby rattlesnake.
yeah,
You
they're out and
probably
about. Not as
noticed it
much
before it
right
was too
now,
late.
right? I think now is not too bad, right? Because there's the rain and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
definitely
I
in the
just saw the
summertime.
one. It was a sunny day. What? But how about you? Have you done anything over the last couple of months that we have not been podcasting?
Yeah, so I've been doing more stand up paddleboarding in the bay, and
Mm-hmm.
so this is kind of a new thing. Is I got an inflatable stand up paddleboard, and then I'll get out early in the morning. I live not too far from the bay, and just get out there. I mean, there's literally nobody out there. It's like just me. So if something happens to me and everyone's listening, I'm probably like somewhere in the ocean. So I go out there and I would paddle out and just cruise around and you get a lot of exercise kind of being in the bay and paddling and stuff like that. But also it's just really cool just to be out away from everything, kind of seeing land from a distance, which is really,
Mm-hmm.
really fun. Had a couple bat rays go underneath my paddleboard as I was coming into the beach a couple
Oh,
of times
nice.
and stuff. Just really neat stuff like that. So yeah, I've been doing that, and also as you know, we've been grinding on the business and getting things done and trying to take things to the next level again, and figure all those things out. But we also had a really great Halloween. We went all in on the Ghostbusters theme and just
Mm-hmm.
paper mache and made signs and lights and costumes and everything and just put on this huge event in the front of our house. And I really enjoyed that. It didn't even feel like work to me, even though I was doing it, working on it for a couple hours every night before bed. Um, but it was super fun. It was nice to kind of like kick off the fall season with a real big fun event on the street. So,
Oh yeah,
as
the
I was
pictures
saying,
you sent me were
yeah.
looked fantastic. The trap, the ghost trap that you
Oh yeah.
made, and the Ghostbusters sign that you made and put up, and like
Yeah.
all the. I'm sure you said you had hundreds of kids come by.
Yep, yep,
That's
yep.
pretty awesome.
It was a pretty big event. The ghost sign was like a 4 foot by 4 foot actual replica of the sign that was outside of the building in New York City that the Ghostbusters worked out of, and my mother-in-law actually worked on that almost every single day for like 14 days because she's really,
Wow.
really artistic and good with paper mache. And then the ghost trap I worked on took me a couple weeks to make, and that was the whole thing was out of cardboard and paper mache as well. And then the
Mm-hmm.
costumes, my wife, we ordered them, and she sewed on the patches, and we just kind of went all out, and we figured why not? It's like the neighborhood is very busy, and all the kids love to visit, and so we might as well make it a big event every year. So um, yeah, it was pretty rad. But hey, let's jump into this thing because I am I am perplexed. I am interested. I am confused. I'm everything all mixed into one. I'm sure other people are thinking the same thing. So let me just build a little context around this before we actually get into all the details of it. So let's build a little context around this before we kind of jump into all the details. So the company is called Humane, and it was started by these former Apple designers. And they created this product called the AI pin. And basically it's this pin that attaches to your lapel, or if you have like a backpack on or something, you can snap it to the strap of the backpack. It's a wearable AI device that allows you to do basically all the things that you do on your smartphone, but you're doing them all basically with your voice or your hand movements and things like that. So you could pull information, you can make calls, take pictures, video. You could use your hand gestures to move between songs. The display on it is mostly audio, but it has this this laser ink display that projects onto your hand. So when you put your hand up to the pin, it shoots a light and then it shows what the display looks like. And then you can use it to kind of switch between songs or look things up or kind of whatever you're thinking. It's kind of based off of the OpenAI model, and it's pretty impressive for what they showed, but it's also confusing because it's like all this can be done with a pair of really good connected headphones that are connected to your phone. So I think we're in this gray central area where it's like we see the future heading in one direction, but a lot of people are super comfortable in the current space. So what was your initial thoughts, D? Because I'm glad this device came out because I feel like it's the first thing that made people kind of go like, ooh, that's interesting. Wow. Like in a long time.
Well, I want to caveat anything that I say with this is only based on the public information that's been out now.
Correct. Yeah.
And everything can change once we learn more about this or we get it in our hands and stuff. But when I saw it, the first thing that ran through my head was just why?
Uh-huh.
Like it feels as though this doesn't do anything that you couldn't do with just your smartphone, right? Like the use cases they run through are cool, like that live translation thing and music playback and things and stuff. And I was like, well, you can do all that with a smartphone now. Google has all of these things available that you can use on a normal on any normal phone, and they don't charge any money for it for like Google Lens or Google Translate or these kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my device reading my text to me out loud, especially if I'm out in public. I have no problem reading it. And there are plenty of other wearables in the market with smartwatches and clips, and the Ray-Bans has these new smart sunglasses out that look pretty good. So it didn't, for me, again, I always drill things down to kind of functionality and use cases, and I didn't really see anything new here from a functionality standpoint. What was interesting is that it's providing an alternative, depending on how well this AI works. It's providing an alternative to Google and OpenAI and some of the other stuff that's out there. Even OpenAI isn't providing all the functionality that some of the Google stuff is being provided. And I'm sure some other companies do. The reality is, amongst the major tech companies, amongst the FANG companies, they're kind of outside of Google, like Apple and Amazon have not done as much with kind of these AI use cases. So there's not a lot of competition out there. And that's when I looked at this and thought to myself, other than this kind of being this from the hardware, it feels very much like a wedge device that might be obsolete in 6 months because somebody's going to announce like a full-blown AR headset, pair of glasses or something that looks just like a pair of glasses, but does everything that this does, but also provides a heads-up display kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The software element of it could be interesting, especially as an acquisition target for a company like Apple, who wants to integrate with this into their ecosystem and compete with Google.
I don't know.
Hardware is very much like why. It's just it reminds me of like the robot operated buddy from like 1984.
Yeah,
that was just a Trojan horse to get the Nintendo systems into toy stores. What did you think?
Oh yeah. So my brain kind of breaks this stuff up. So let's talk about software first. To do this properly, as you and I know, you and I have worked on voice-enabled devices for years. In order to pull this off and have it work with millions of people kind of like engaging with it on a regular basis and pulling the information, your software has to be dialed in. It has to almost be a closed system, because some of the examples they used, like they would tap it and then they'd say, what was the password so what was the gate key for my gate or something like that in the video, right? And it's going to go through your notes. It's going to try to find that gate key. So I have all these questions in my head. Like, for example, what if you have multiple gate keys in there? Is it just going to start spewing out different ones? And then you get frustrated because you can't look it up quickly and you're constantly having to do these commands and you're talking out loud, right? Like there's so many layers to voice recognition and software. I mean, voice recognition and all this type of stuff, as you know, has been around since the early 90s. right? With the Dragon Speak 2 and all the way until now. So the software side of this, if they can pull off the software side of this, I agree with you. It's an acquisition target. It's a team that was able to use OpenAI in a search way. Like basically they're using it as search. As OpenAI changes its model, how does that kind of affect the hardware? How does that affect kind of how everything functions? So I had a lot of thoughts on that. When it came to the hardware, I was very confused. So I looked at it and I thought, I don't know that I want to get into this position where I'm keeping this hardware device on my chest all the time and it has to be out. Now the person on there did say that you can use it with a pair of headphones, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's recording the world in a weird way, right? Because it's like it has the camera on it, it has a video camera on it, it has the microphone. I'm sure the microphone's turned on many times when you're trying to like do commands, it's picking things up around you, ambient noises. So it's like this recording device that's on you. And I don't know why we have to constantly try to get away from the phone right now. I don't know what the reasoning is for us to kind of like divert away from something that works really, really well, functions really, really well. And you can get a pair of great headphones and basically have a lot of this functionality. So I'm not really sure where it fits in, but I was really impressed with it being able to like parse through your notes and find information you needed and tell you things and that kind of stuff and not have to take your phone out and stare at it. Right. So it was doing some of the things that I think everybody is hoping they can get to, but in a mode that is like a bit odd. Right. So like if you said
Yeah.
to me, oh, I'm going to put this, you could leave your phone in your pocket and now your earbuds or your, whatever choice you want to use for earbuds. Right. You can just talk out loud, ask questions, do all that kind of stuff. And then it'll pipe that information into you. I'd be like, oh, that makes sense. That's logical sense. Like the next step in UX innovation. This seems like almost like it diverts away from it into something completely new. And I'm not sure people are kind of ready for that or want
Well,
that.
it does feel a little bit like, I mean, from a hardware perspective, there people talk about like, oh, I want to be able to get away from carrying my phone and blah blah blah. But I feel like the actual digital leash is the software that it's getting. It's the notifications that are coming in. It's the text messages. It's the Slacks, and just leaving a piece of hardware at home, but then getting them on a different device doesn't really kind of get you away from that. And
Yeah.
then there are already, smart earbuds from like every major manufacturer. There's Amazon, there's Samsung, there's Google, there's Apple. Obviously, they all have this stuff that can read your text to you and take voice recognition commands without having to take your phone out of your pocket. And then there's also all the watches where you can look at all this stuff without taking your phone out of your pocket, which is nice. And it's kind of, for me, a lot of those just seem like they have been, or it's just a convenience where like it's just another way to access the same thing, but the core functionality is no different, right? You're still just getting your messages and notifications, but it's in a slightly different way. I don't know that this provides anything different because it is being done through audio only, and there have been I have felt that the voice interface has not really been there yet. And we've seen this from working within voice stuff is that the issue with voice and why it hasn't taken off the way that people thought that it might was because it turns out that beyond simple commands like, hey, wake word, play music or something like that, or what
Yeah.
time is it and things like that, it actually takes more mental effort to formulate your query in a way that it's going to understand what you're asking
Yes.
for, then it would be
Yes.
just going to your phone and tapping on the screen, and it's less reliable, and you have to repeat yourself. And you see, I don't think that OpenAI and ChatGPT has quite solved it, because you look at how these prompts that people are doing that are like 2 pages long in order to get something complex done.
Yep.
It's like it's not quite there yet, and I don't know that if it's necessarily going to be improving on the current experience. And at the end of the day, even if you get all of this other stuff figured out, it's still just basically a miniature smartphone without a visual display that you can use to line up your pictures. that is now going to involve a new software ecosystem that is going to need access to your personal data in order for it to return all these searches or to read your text to you. So it's just, that automatically builds in another state of vulnerability, because even if they're as secure as they can possibly be, it's still now a new touch point for that software system. It's a new API that didn't exist before that is accessing your data. So I don't really know the point, and maybe they'll
Yeah,
surprise us. One thing that was interesting, I'm going to say,
yeah,
because I don't want to come off too negative here,
no,
is they had the demo where they pointed the camera at a bunch of a palm full of almonds and told you how many calories were in it and the nutrition for it, and that's cool. I'm sure saw that it was almonds, and they know almonds have a very standardized size, and they can count how many almonds they were. But if you could do that, if I can point that at like a California burrito, and it can tell how big it is and what's in it and everything, and tell me what that is, or like, my partner is a chef, right? She makes dishes that just don't exist. She creates them. If I can point it at that and can tell me like, all right, well, I can tell that this is what the ingredients are. Maybe I tell it a few little information like that. That puree is almond paste or something like that, and it can
yeah,
return like, all right, well, here's what the nutrition is for something that's unique. Then that's interesting. But otherwise, it's convenience work, because I can just go to my app and tell it like, oh, I ate 12 almonds, and it already knows. So it's just like, it's not a new use case yet.
yeah. The other side of it too is that example that they did when they grabbed the product when they're in the store. And then it says, tell me if this is cheaper somewhere else, or I forgot how he prompted it, right? And then it
Yeah.
scanned the product or the UPC code on the back, and then it told you and that kind of stuff. That I think that prompt comes from the fact that people probably said like, oh, it's really uncomfortable to go to a store and use my phone and scan, because it's like rude to, look for other prices when you're inside of a store. There's probably some sort of behavioral thing there. But I was going back to this original conversation we had back in graduate school many, 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 many years ago, about how we were in like a depth and perception course or something like that. And they were talking about what happens when you just take the visual component away, or you take the auditory component away from a person, right? So
Mm-hmm.
as human beings, we're built, most of us, right? Not everybody, but most of us are built with, this auditory, visual kind of experience. We see things, we hear things, we touch things, we taste things, that kind of stuff, right? Is that the visual one is one of the biggest ones, right? Being able to see something and understand what it is. Why are we constantly trying to take this away from people? That's just a feeling. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that by pulling the visual component away, it makes people
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And like you said, now I have to use this mental processing power of going like, okay, how am I going to phrase this? How do I ask this question? If it comes back with, it can't find it, then I got to rephrase it. All this is happening in their brain, and you can't visually see it, but it annoys people. It frustrates people. It makes them feel uncomfortable. And so this modality is interesting if it's perfect, but like, I don't think it
Yeah.
can be perfect yet. Right.
Yeah, it's going to be a long time before it's because that last like 5% before you get to perfection, or at least even the usable proximity to truly usable proximity to perfection, is really, really hard. But you said something that was interesting. Like, why are we trying to get rid of the visual element? And I don't. Here's what my thought is. It's not so much that we're trying to get rid of the visual element. We're trying to get rid of the handheld element. We're trying to get rid of like things operating in space element, which is why, and we've seen this, so many people really want these augmented reality glasses, where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I can still see this. I can see what my pictures look like as I'm taking them and things, but I don't have to hold my phone up to my
Sure.
face. It's a small screen, and they've gotten better, but like there's all these like limitations that are involved there. But at the end of the day, I just don't think it's voice, and I think voice is a component. It's just another interface. It's not a game changer. Let me ask you a question, right? If you are the main way that this seems to interact, and it doesn't have wake words, which they spin it as like this, oh, it's not always listening thing, which is kind of BS. It can be always listening if they wanted to. But the reality is, it's kind of old. I saw that and I said, okay, well, they just removed the extra processor they need in order to have a constantly listening for a wake word kind of thing, which simplifies their manufacturing and design and engineering. And
Yeah.
instead, that you just require you to press a button, which makes a noise. And even just watching the video, the noise got annoying to me. Like beep, beep boop over and over again. But are you going to want to? You're out at a grocery store or at like an electronics store or wherever else, like a Best Buy or something like that, and you see something and you want to search for it. Are you going to like? You're actually going to press the button, let it beep boop in a way that everybody can hear it, and then tell it that you want to like find where I can buy this thing cheaper in a way that every single person around you can hear you, including the staff and stuff. I'm like, oh, this jerk is going off and showcasing here and going to go buy this stuff on Amazon.
Yeah.
Is anybody going to do that? I wouldn't do that. I'd rather just like do what I do now. Just like look it up on my phone. Like how much is this, hard drive on Amazon right now? It's like,
Well, the
I
reason
can do
why
that comparison
the
show.
reason why you don't feel uncomfortable looking it up on your phone is because nobody knows what you're really doing. So
Yeah,
you
it's
could be
private.
responding to a text message. You could be looking at your note. When I go shopping at the store, we have a shared notes like you and I do with work.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I have a shared
Mm-hmm.
note. So then when I go to the store, she's adding things and I see it and then I just kind of
Yep.
grab them
I
as
do
I
the same
go.
thing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking at my phone trying to figure out if I'm missing something or whatever it is. But if I'm standing there saying, is this item cheaper on Amazon? You're right. It is uncomfortable and it's a little strange. And even if I had my earbuds in, it means I'm just talking to myself. Um, I, I'm just not a fan of it. I do love that they're trying really hard to scan objects and give you data and that kind of stuff. But then now that you're packing it all into this tiny little tiny square that goes on your lapel, are you actually pulling yourself away from using the best technology in order to properly scan things? So like for example, if Android or iPhone comes out with a camera that's so unbelievably good that it, like you said, it can scan a burrito and look at the layers and know what's in it or whatever it is, I imagine that camera is going to pack a punch and probably be a little bit larger in size, right? But now you're like, no, we
Yeah.
can't use that one because we have this tiny, tiny little interface where we only talk to it. And I'm not going to say only talk. It's not fair. They would probably argue with me and say there is a laser display that
Yeah.
displays on your
Well,
hand.
yeah. They had a
But
gestural interface, which I was also just like, if I could think of something that was less reliable and more annoying than a voice interface, it would be a gestural interface.
yeah, it's a very strange development. Now, being completely open minded, would you ever augment your iPhone or Android experience with one of these? Meaning you would have this thing connected and you'd use it for taking photos like a GoPro while you're driving, riding down the street, or using it to do simple things like like send Brian a text and tell him I can't make the podcast today or something like that. Like, can you see an augmentation there where you would like add it to your existing experience, or does it just not really?
Well, here's, I don't want to be too negative because I'm sure these guys are working really hard on this, but the
No, I'm
reality
sure
is,
they are.
I
Like,
know
I have a lot of
I,
respect for
I
them
would
trying.
not, yeah. So I'm going to sum it up like this. I would not spend money on this.
Yeah,
If somebody gave it to me, which happens all the time, like people give us like, oh, here, try this thing out, or like, oh,
yeah,
somebody gave me this and I want you to try it out. Let me know what you think. That kind of stuff happens all the time. I'd probably use it a little bit, and then it would go into the drawer with all the other gadgets that were like did a thing that I didn't really need it to do, and it would probably live there. Now, what would be interesting if this was a launching point to a new kind of competitor to like the Google Translate
hmm
and Google Magic Eraser and Google this and Google that. Because, like for example, the scanning things in the store, you've been able to do that with the Google app, and I'm sure with Amazon too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've done this with Amazon like 10 years ago,
yeah,
right? And it'll tell you like, oh, here's what it costs on Amazon, or here's where it is on local stores, or where it is online. That's been around for a long time. Uh, but if it was a competitor to that, if it could be like ways to Google Maps and just compete on the level of like capabilities or reliability or anything like that, and famously Waze was eventually acquired by Google and their capabilities were imported and made part of Google Maps too. And Waze is still around, you can still use it, and it has the gamification in a way that Google Maps doesn't, but it contributed something, right? It as a competitor, it contributed something to the overall design of that category of software. If this could do that, I think it's really interesting. If it's dependent on like this hardware dongle that sits on your chest and kind of just looks weird and has like I'm sorry guys if you're listening. I'm trying to be helpful here, but calling it humane and it's not about like saving animals or something seems or funding orphanages or something like that or school books or anything just sounds really pretentious. And then
Yeah.
you have like the infinite like power system, which is just a swappable battery. It's not anything like that needs to have its own name. Like it just screams pretension, and then like kind of get back to basics, get to the point where like we're either going to do we're doing what other people are doing, but we're going to do it better, and we're going to show you that. And we might do that by like I'm going to point the camera instead of a handful of almonds, I'm going to point it at like a poke bowl, which has every poke bowl has their own thing, right? Because every single person likes their poke bowl to be different. It's going to have different ingredients in there, and it's might have
Yeah.
wonton strips as opposed to furikake flakes and stuff like that. It can
Yum.
tell me what the calories and nutrition are for all the different components that are in there because it's such a crazy melange, right? Which is speaking of pretentious, throwing out the French.
I was just gonna say, man, come on. You sounded like one of
I'm
those
around the
Silicon
French
Valley.
trained chefs, right? So like this is the words that they use, but if it can do that, bravo. That is something like, all right, give me your app. I'm not going to buy your hardware, but give me your app and I'll use it. But this is just like it is a bit of wait and see. The hardware again feels very Trojan horse. It's a way to get attention. It looks nice. It looks like an Apple product. It looks like the kind of thing that Apple would eventually like acquire and bring it in. Even though they don't really do that, Apple doesn't really do
They
that very
wouldn't
much,
do
especially
that.
with hardware.
They wouldn't do that. Like
No, I mean
that is
Apple's MO is
not.
they're going to build it themselves,
Yeah,
or
but
they're
that's
going to
not. That's
hire
not
their
a.
staff back and have them build the software. It's
That,
true. It's
that's
reality.
true. That's not. It just doesn't. It doesn't strike me as a physical device that they would build. Like it's not in. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem in their game plan right now. But they already have the earbuds, which are just like amazing. So it's like why
Yeah.
it's like a
Or
Fortune
you
100
integrate
company.
the functionality into the Apple Watch. It's basically an Apple Watch that can't tell you any of the health data.
True. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is next to your body, so I imagine it could probably pick up some stuff like steps and all that. But yeah, I know because they want to. They said that they're
Yeah.
the key things they're working on. Right? Remember, it was like health was one of them. But I want to talk about
Yeah.
one other thing though. One other thing that just to me kind of seals the deal for it being a real challenge in the market is they said it's powered
Mm-hmm.
by its own cellular system, so it costs you $24.99 a month.
Oh yeah,
So
that's a death knell.
yeah, it's so here's why. I don't imagine, and I don't want to, like I said, these guys are probably awesome. I just don't want to beat on it. I'm just trying to be like realistic. I don't want to pay $25 more per month when I'm already paying 100 or whatever it is to have my phone active. And
Yeah.
now I'm paying 25 for this, but yet it's half of the features or more are already available on my phone, right? So you're taking the consumer and you're putting them in a position where they have to make a determination which one's better. Well, which one's going to win? The phone's going to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it comes down to it, now if you're saying, okay, this is only for like the kind of elite tech people out there that are willing to spend $25 a month, then you're talking to that top 1%. Maybe they'll dabble with it. But
Yeah.
what I'm getting from you, like, let me just be honest here. What I'm getting from you is I kind of feel like what you're saying is if they could take one of these areas and kill it, they're going to get acquired in order to implement that idea into some other hardware.
Yes.
That's it right there. I mean, like
Probably pre-existing hardware because I don't think this hardware needs to exist. It would actually one of the best things they could do is have an OLED display in the front, outward facing, so that you can use it to do things. Like if you were going to a conference and you wanted to have your name and a QR code up, or somebody could tap it with their phone and get to your LinkedIn or something. And it's just up all the time and it's secure so nobody could rip it off and stuff. Or if you go to like Comic-Con and it's playing and it's got this beautiful display that's showing like the Spider-Man animatic or something like that. That I think is kind of cool. That is the kind of thing where people now buy it because it has like this outwardly displaying kind of like communication about who you are. But as it is now, it's just like, why wouldn't it like just build it into the smartwatch, right? Build it into the Apple Watch, or just put your phone in like a front pocket with the camera facing outward, and you're good.
yeah,
Like
I mean, I
other
just
than
heard
that, I
something the
don't
other
get it.
day. I did not verify it, but I did hear something that said that I guess as of this year, the Apple Watch is by volume the number one selling watch of all time.
That makes sense.
By volume, right?
Yeah.
So if you just literally just, if let's say that's correct, I didn't look it up, but let's say that's correct, then what you're basically saying is that all you have to do is take all of these features and integrate it into that, and simply all those people now have it,
Hmm.
right? Because it's like you could take your watch and you could bend it over, and you could take pictures of things, you can look at things, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's Dick Tracy on steroids, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like I don't want to bag on these guys. Like, to build hardware and software and integration and getting it to work is tremendously challenging. I
Yeah.
mean, we've been in the room with all these startup people many, many times. It is really hard, and it takes a team, it takes a journey, it's a big deal. I just personally, from a UX perspective, putting that hat on and being honest with our listeners, I don't see it right now, but I do see where
Yeah.
they're going with some of these features. So I want to transition to the last part here and talk a little bit about trust and safety, because I don't, here's the thing. Is this the new Google Glass? And I say that as a joke, right? Meaning, like, as I'm walking down the
Yeah.
street, I see somebody with this thing on and I go, oops, there they are recording me.
Well, that is an issue, right? So and that definitely came up. It's very showy, but it's also like if it, like I said, if it had an outward display and it showed like something cool or something fun or something for other people to see, I think that's a great way to kind of like bring people into the experience and feel like they're like you're not being such a technology show off with the
Yeah.
glass hole like it was. Yeah, I think there's a stigma associated with it, especially if like then you beep boop and you're giving it commands, then it's talking back to you and stuff in public. That's just like that's the guy who, it's basically the same thing as the guy who is on the bus or the train and is taking calls on speakerphone. That's who you
Mm-hmm.
are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think anybody likes that. I think that there's one of the challenges of building hardware with integrated software and all this kind of stuff is that the area that I feel is least discussed during these innovation times, and like I said, we have been in the room for 20 years helping people with this stuff, is the social aspects of hardware software. So what you're talking about is a huge deal, right? Like, you build this whole entire thing and you're saying we're going to send off tens of thousands of people into the world and in the community talking out loud to themselves all day long,
Mhm.
right? Like, is that really going to fit in the model of
Yeah,
human
that's kind of
behavior?
your vision of the world.
Yeah. Right. So your
Yeah.
vision of the world is this is what everyone's going, "Rah, rah, 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 rah," like, and beep, beep, boop, 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 like constantly all the time. Does that fit into the way the world functions? And right now I look at it and I go, no, it doesn't. And so
Hmm.
I don't bite on it. Like, I don't see it. I don't see that happening. What actually happens, though, and I'll explain this to people who aren't living here, is that sometimes the endeavor of going out and building something incredibly challenging like this and making it work to a point where it's functional, it's cool, it's interesting, but maybe it doesn't like fit into the market, is sometimes enough for a big acquisition or a big
It's true.
team purchase, because you went out and you were brave enough to make this happen. And so another big company says, look, you maybe didn't hit the mark on this, but where you're heading and where you're going, I want to integrate that into our glasses, or I want your whole team to come here and help us make this a reality. And sometimes that's the win, right? And it right now, my gut tells me it feels this way, but maybe they'll prove us wrong. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah. So something like I just something just occurred to me, right? One of the things that's a head scratcher about this is that it both does nothing truly new, but it's also incredibly difficult to have gotten where they've gotten,
yeah.
right? Ignoring the hardware, which is, they say hardware is hard, right? If they're developing their own voice recognition system, AI technology, image recognition system, all of these things like on their own, and not using, what is usually done, which is you're using APIs and you're piggybacking on somebody else's thing. Like
Mhm.
if you're using Apple's camera or Android's camera, you're querying it with an API. You're not building your own camera from scratch. So if they did this, that means they have to build basically their own operating system. They have to build the AI. They had to build the camera system, the image recognition, the voice recognition, the microphones, the speakers, all of these things they have to build from scratch. And then they're basically creating a competitor to iOS and Android. It's another mobile operating system.
Well, that's I think what they're
And
trying
then
to do.
yeah, there's all the things associated with that. They have to have all the data security, all the APIs, all that. That is a monumental task. And if they're able to do that and they're able to develop a competitor to those that's actually working and doing well, that's great. I salute you. Find partner with Samsung or somebody and put it on phones, and put
Absolutely,
it
yeah.
in devices and stuff.
Yeah.
Because if it's competing with that, then it's probably better than anything that they have in house. And that's a tremendous value. But the reality is, if you're trying to fit in this wedge and not compete directly with Android and iOS, which if somebody came to me and said, this is what we're going to do, and tell them they're crazy. But if they can, then like bravo to you, try to do what you can with it. But at the same time, if you are competing with them, you kind of need a competitive differentiator. Don't necessarily see what it is right now. You need something to say like, why would you use this and not them?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is right now. And it's not, for me, it's not the hardware. I'd much rather just have a smartphone.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think we're on the same. We feel the same about it, and I also kind of look at it too as like we're getting to this point where there's so much voice, visual, um, integrated health data, all this kind of stuff that we're getting to the point where we're trying to figure out like how do we even like understand what you own anymore, what is yours, like and that kind of stuff. And that kind of brings up a point here because they did, put on their website. I was looking at it, said at Humane, we believe you deserve the ability to own your data from the outset. That personal
Mm-hmm.
information should be protected, and that having transparency as a value isn't radical. As a privacy first company, we build knowing privacy should be a core value and honestly a given. Our commitment to you, is to you that which you value most. And I feel like all these new companies are starting to head in that direction because soon I think the government's going to step in at some point and say, okay, you're basically sitting on someone's lapel, you're recording people in public, you're picking up on their bio data, you're listening to their voice, you're taking their voice, probably recording their voice, holding their voice, using their voice, right? Like all this kind of stuff. And who owns that? Right. And so this one actually pushed my thinking over the edge a little bit because I realized we're stepping right back into this whole idea that we could be recording people all the time while we're walking around down the street. And so it
Well,
made me question whether or
yeah.
not like this has to be a big component of these new companies coming out,
Mm-hmm.
of figuring out what we're gonna do with when it comes to holding, storing, analyzing data that is ours that we're giving to them.
Well, from ultimately, I read that and I thought to myself, well, this is basically GDPR or the California version of it. That's all built into those laws,
Yeah.
and everybody does that. They support it because they have to, because you kind of have to do business. So it's nice of them to make that a core value.
Yeah.
If you're out in public and somebody records you, they're within their rights. You're in public. If you're in your home, that's a different story.
Mhm.
But it's the reality. If you don't know, if you wanted your data removed from Apple's servers or Google's or Facebook or whoever else, the transparency is built in by law, so you can ask them like, what data do you have on me? I want you to delete it, that kind of
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're actually going to follow through with it is less likely going to be a matter of them being willing to do so because they want to keep your data. It's more that the act of digging up your data, finding out which data is yours, and then deleting it is just very difficult and challenging.
Mhm.
Uh, but like to me, that's again, it doesn't necessarily move the needle. I'm just thinking through kind of like from a use case perspective. It's not just the features and the functionality, right? But it's a use case is really a scenario in which you're going to be using it. So thinking through the scenario, you're out somewhere, you've paid $25 a month so that you can leave your phone at home. That's kind of the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
And you receive a notification, but you can't reply because you don't have a real screen and a keyboard. So all you know is like, all right, well now I'm 20 minutes away from home and I need to respond to this Slack or something, or like this message from my kid's school or something, and I'm just separated from them. Where if
Yeah.
I had just brought my phone with me, I could like reply to them and let them know. But instead, I'm like now gotta like figure out a way to get home as fast as I can so that I can respond to this stuff. It
You
just
mean you're
doesn't
not
seem
gonna
like something I
you're
would
not gonna
want
go
to do.
stand in the corner, D, and just talk out loud?
No, I mean, all right, you've got something like number one, it's a work Slack, right? Are you gonna like speak out loud about something in public? Like that's something that like the Apple police could, if you're working for Apple, for example, they literally have an Apple police on staff that will come get you. Uh,
Yeah,
uh, allegedly, I'm gonna throw allegedly so that I'm not
allegedly.
exposing myself to any kind of liability. But yeah, I'm not going to do it. Even if there weren't any negative consequences, something's going on with my kid at school, I'm not going to speak out loud in public about it. No.
Yeah,
And
like, kinda
even
like
then, like, all right, am I sure that that they're transcribing it correctly before I send it off? This kind of thing. No, and you're paying $25 a month. That hopefully doesn't go up in price to 35 after 6 months. Uh, no, it just doesn't compute. The scenario doesn't work for me.
yeah, I was thinking too, like, they'll probably at some point, if it grabs and people use it or they enjoy it, is that they'll probably have it so it could pair to your phone so that it could use the cellular on your phone or something.
That's what I would assume. But then it also just becomes okay. This is just a clip-on kind of thing. It's not that different from having your watch on, or the only thing that's
Yeah.
different is that it can have a forward-facing camera. And if you have your earbuds in and they're smart, because there's tons of smart earbuds, then they can speak to you um, without anybody else hearing you. It's still the voice. You speaking to your device is still awkward in public.
Yeah.
It's awkward at home. Like
You
I
make it
always find
you
voice
make
interface is awkward.
yeah, you make a good point that it's a competitor to the watch. It's not a competitor to the phone.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, I kept thinking of it as a competitor to the phone, but it really is a competitor to the watch because you can, with the cellular version of the watch, right? You can go out for a run, you could do things, you can respond to messages, you could take a phone call,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff when you're out and about. You just don't have that forward facing camera. But well, anyways,
Yeah.
this was fun. This was a great kickoff, I think, because it's such a UX driven product. Like I would love to have been in the room with them when they were like figuring out feature set and trying to figure out why they want to do it, how they want to do it. Did they get feedback from people in the community? Um, God, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to figure out how they got to the point where they funded $250 million into this operation and got it off the ground like they did, and are now trying to find their position. Um, but hey, if anybody's out there who's listening to this podcast has comments or ideas or opinions, we totally want to hear it. But thank you all so much for listening today. Really appreciate it. You could follow us on the X Podcast on YouTube. If you have any questions or anything, please post them on there. We read all the comments. Not very many comments on there right now, but that's okay. And thank you so much for listening. And we will see you all next week.